everyone. Happy New Year. So happy to see you all today. Welcome joining today's class, 2021 Real Estate Outlook. I'm Pauline Lam from Kota Realty, your 2021 Co-Chair Education Committee, West and Gabriel Valley Realtors. A few housekeeping tips. All participants will be muted when you enter into the meeting. And should you have any questions, please enter it into the chat box. Jeff will address the question and help for the Q&A section. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on YouTube channel, West and Gabriel Valley Realtors. Now, I'm so happy to have Mr. Mel Wang, our education committee member and our past president, to introduce our very, very special speaker, well-known Mr. Oscar Wei from C.A.R., our new deputy chief economist. Mel, the floor is yours.
So let's get started. Now, as I said, we have been working from home. Many of you maybe working from home. I know, as a realtor, you guys have to do, go out and, do business as well. But at the same time, I think a lot of the activities has been done at home. For me, I have been since I think last March, I have been working from home. And even though, of course, the technology allows us to do so, but I'm a person-to-person, I'm a face-to-face kind of person. I like to interact with people. So hopefully, we can have the virus under control very, very soon. Hopefully, the vaccines will be rolled out will be massively rolled out, very, very soon, and we can get back to somewhat normal. Now, the last 12 months have been very, very different, and you probably know it affected, the not just the public health conditions, but also the economy as well as the housing market. To what extent, though? At the beginning of the outbreak, we were all very, very concerned, and we're still very concerned about, the public health conditions. But at the very beginning, there were a lot of uncertainties. We didn't know exactly what's going to happen. Remember, at the end of March, we had a lockdown. And then it lasted for about 6 weeks until I think mid-May or so. There were a lot of concerns, whether it be concerns from the buyers, sellers, as well as realtors. So let's take a quick look first at what happened very shortly after the lockdown. In May, when we released some of our numbers, this is what happened. Soon after the lockdown, again, because of uncertainties about what's going to happen with the housing market, what's going to happen with the economy, take a look at what happened with sales. This is a sales number in May of 2020 compared to about a year ago in May 2019. Sales actually dropped quite significantly, 41%, 41.4% on a year-over-year basis. And because of that significant drop, the first 5 months of the year, now it's not only May that actually dropped in sales, but April and March as well, again, because of the concern about what's going to happen to coronavirus. Now, some of you may have attended, my speech at the Global Real Estate Forum, maybe somewhere in February or so. At that time, I probably mentioned something like, okay, well, we are going to, at that time, we already knew that there was a pandemic. There was a coronavirus, I shouldn't say a pandemic, there was a coronavirus outbreak in China. At that time, I think I might have mentioned, and someone, I don't remember who, came up to me and asked me what's going to happen with the stock market or financial market. But my general statement for the economy and housing market was, well, it's probably going to be contained, mainly in Asia. There might be some fluctuation in the financial market, but to the housing market probably will be okay. But of course, I was a little off. In the first half of the year, look at what happened. We have significant drop in sales in the housing market in California, 41.4%, and then for the first 5 months, 13%. For that first 5 months, basically because people remember what happened in the previous recessions. Some of you were in the previous recessions in 2008, 2009. You experienced what happened when the housing market collapsed, when the economy tanked. Now, that was triggered by a housing market collapse because of the mortgage meltdown, mortgage market meltdown. And at that time, sales actually dropped quite significantly. From I think starting in 2006, 2007, sales actually started declining in California in home sales. And what about price? Price at that time actually dropped, about 50%. So significant drop. So buyers didn't know what's going to happen. Buyers concerned, so they actually held off. They didn't buy anything, in March or in April, resulting in May sales actually dipping quite significantly. And you can see that in price as well. Take a look at price right here. It looks like price in May was at 588, 070, which dropped about 3.7% on a year-over-year basis. And then as far as inventory is concerned, supply was at 4.3 months. Now, many of you have been noticing, tracking the unsold inventory situation. You know that at 4.3 is actually not too bad. It's actually, in fact, is actually high compared to the previous year by about 30 some percent. So if you just look at May, you may think, wow, the market is really, really bad. Who would have thought, though, 6 or 7 months later, for the state as a whole, at least, if you look at the end of last year, things actually gotten a little bit better. In the second half of the year, people start realizing, yes, the economy actually has gotten worse. Well, primarily because of the lockdown, but after the lockdown, things actually started looking a little bit better. In terms of the economy, it's still struggling. Don't take it wrong. This economy is still struggling. It's going to struggle for a little bit, but unemployment rate actually start improving. But what's important for the housing market is interest rates, because of the concern about the economy. The cost of borrowing has to be lowered by the Federal Reserve, and a lot of it's not just California, it's the U.S., it's the global economic recession. So the interest rates from all different countries actually start lowering, and interest rates right now, many of it has gone down to below 3. In fact, I think it set a few records in the last few months. It actually touched, I think, the 30-year fixed rate touched 2.65 at one point, started bouncing back, early part of this month or early part of the year, but it stayed at a very low level. And it's not just us who notice it. Buyers notice it as well. Many buyers realize, okay, well, this is a rare opportunity because we've never had a 2.6 or below 3% interest rates environment. Uh, Remember what happened. I'm keep on going back to what happened 12, 13 years ago when we had a recession. Even in 2006, 2007, interest rate was considered low at the time, was around 6%, 5.5, 6%, right? Compared to now, that's actually kind of high, to many buyers. So many buyers who are not affected by the economic recessions actually jump into the market. In fact, second half of the year, we started seeing a lot of increase in sales. Take a look at the end of the year, December, what happened? Sales actually increased by 28%. That's pretty significant. And there's without anything to compare with, it might be hard to get an idea. But look at 28% for every single month in the second half of the year. We have been actually increasing by double digit. 28% happened to be the largest increase in the last, I believe, 15 years or so. But also look at the sales level. Sales level, it is at 510 or 509,000. Now, we usually, when we talk about home sales, like last year or the year before, I usually use the benchmark 400,000 because we have been actually at around 400,000, a little bit over 400,000. But for home sales to actually continue to rise to that level to 500, the last time that it happened was probably about 2008, 2007, quite some time ago. And it is because of, again, interest rates. It is because of, people also are, having a renewed desire to buy a home. And that's partly because of the pandemic, people are working from home. A lot of people are actually working from home. So the sense of home ownership is actually more important compared to 12 months ago. So there is the housing market is actually a rare bright spot, for the economy. We'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. So because of the second half of the year being very, very strong. Take a look at this number, the year-to-date number right here. Um, Existing single-family homes actually increased from 2019. So for the 12 months of 2020, when you add everything up compared to the year before, it actually exceeded previous year's level. Very surprised to me, when I did my forecast back in May and June, I expected, the whole housing market to actually decline. And to decline by double digit, but for the fact that with the fact that interest rates being at a very low level, it actually really pull us out. What about price? Price at the same time, you probably might have already talked to your buyers or sellers. I think at the beginning, people were still concerned about, many buyers are probably still thinking, well, at the time that home prices will drop, but at the end of last year, many people probably thought, okay, well, yes, prices are not probably not going to drop much if there is any room to drop. And in fact, at the end of last year, it increased by 17%. This number, 717 or 718, is actually another record high. We actually set 4 or 5 record highs in 2020, all in the second half of the year. And of course, if you look at unsold inventory, earlier when we looked at the May number, it was 4.3 months. Now it's 1.3. So let me get into a little bit more about the housing market a little bit more. Now, the way I structured the presentation, which I should have mentioned it earlier, is we'll go into housing market first about the state. We'll talk about some regional stuff, and then we'll talk about some city level, and then we'll look at the big picture a little bit, the economy stuff, and then we'll talk about the outlook. So let's get back to the housing market for a little bit. I mentioned it verbally about the housing market that we had in 12, 13 years ago when we had the recessions. This is the recessions that we had, the great recessions that we had in the 2007, 2008. See how long it actually, the home sales actually start declining back in 2005 all the way to 2007, end of 2007, or the third quarter of 2000, or fourth quarter of 2007. And it tanked and it started bouncing back. Now take a look at how long it actually took for the bounce back to complete. It went back to about 500,000 in maybe about a year and a half or so, 16, 18 months or so. But take a look at what happened right here when we just had our recession. It dropped very significantly within a couple months, but it also sharply bounced back. This is a true V-shaped bounce back. Within a 2 or 3 months period of time, it actually bounced back and it has gotten back to the level that we were at and surpassed the level that we were at before by a whole lot. So it is definitely because of interest rates. We'll talk about interest rate in a minute, but first, now when we talk about sales growth, obviously we would love to have every single price segment improve. But if you look at it by price segment, you realize the lower price segments, the 0 to 200, actually it's a 0 to 300 actually dipped. It's not a new thing. We have been seeing the lowest price segment drop below previous year's level because of tight supply. But the other reason why is, I'll briefly mention it now and I'll talk more about it later, is that the economic impact, the pandemic actually affect the economy, different part of the economy differently. For those people who work in the industries that requires face-to-face contact, and they typically have lower income, tend to affect those service sectors a little bit more. And as such, it affects the lower income household a little bit more, and also affect those who purchase lower price properties. And we'll talk more about why that is the case. And because of that reason, and also because of tight supply, the lower price segments haven't been improving much. In fact, it dropped. But look at all the other price segments. The higher end home price segments are actually doing very, very well. 85% and 71% for the million plus. So that's one of the reasons why we're also seeing some increase in price as well. That is, if you take a look at this chart on the right-hand side, you'll see that the share of sales actually changed a little bit in terms of its mix. Used to be in 2019, 46% of all sales were under 500. Now only 37. But at the same time, we're seeing a bigger share in a million, in the 500 plus and the million plus, a much more significant, share, 64% versus 54%. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing some price increase as well. Now, I mentioned about, when we talk about sales, we need to look at, the sentiment. Buyers and sellers sentiments are what we track on a monthly basis. You might have seen this slide on our website. I mean, I may have shared it before as well. We sent out a Google poll, a poll using Google. Google placed it for us in certain websites, and we ask potential buyers and sellers whether it is a good time to buy, whether it is a good time to sell. And we have been doing this for about a year and a half now. And you can take a look at, what happened, or maybe 2 years now, actually. Back in 12 months ago, 25% actually said it was a good time to buy. At that time, interest rate actually started going down. But fast forward to just last month, 25% said further 20, and another 25% said it's a good time to buy also. So it's actually up right about the same as last year. Now, at one point, it actually went all the way up to 29% when interest rates were low, and at the same time, prices were not, increasing by that fast a pace. But because of increase in price in the last, the robust increase in price in the last few months or so, buyers are actually pulling back a little bit in terms of their sentiment. Still, I think a lot of buyers still think it's a good time to buy. At least it's as high as last year. But what about sellers? Sellers also, potential seller, I should say, also believe it is a good time to sell. 59% compared to 56%. It's only a few percentage point higher, I know, but it is still higher. And that's because, of course, low interest rates fuel demand, on the demand side. But at the same time, home prices continue to increase, which helps buyers. If they were to sell the property, they'll probably make some big bucks. But of course, there are homeowners who are not selling now. And that's because they're not only just sellers. If they were to sell property, they will also turn out to be buyers as well, which makes it a little bit more competitive. Again, I'll show you some additional information later on. But here's this interest rate situation. We have record low interest rates. It has been dropping. You can see that a year ago it was 3.62, and now has dropped down to 2.74 based on some Freddie Mac's number. This is the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Drop about 90 basis point, a little bit less than 90 basis point maybe, but that's a significant drop. That means if someone were to buy a house, let's say around 600,000 or so, they probably can save about $200-300 every month, and that means another $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever, and that makes things a little bit easier for them to qualify, for a certain amount of loan. But at the same time, that really motivate some of the buyers. And that's why we have been seeing some increase in demand lately. Now, there are other effects other than the fact that pandemic actually resulted in low interest rates, but there are other coronavirus effect that happens to the housing market, that affect the housing market. Now, you can see low interest rates really help first-time buyers. This is a survey that we do on an annual basis, and we ask our realtors during the summer whether they have been working with first-time buyers or repeat buyers. That number, 38.4%, is actually the highest that we have had for quite some time. I think the highest in the last 10 years. And you can take a look at how it compares to the long-run average. Long-run average is 37.2%. So a lot of first-time buyers at that time were very, very motivated because of interest rates, and the question is whether that number will last. But before we answer that questions, let's kind of look at some of the reasons why that might be the case, that first-time buyers has gone up. First, of course, as I said, it is because of interest rates being very low. But on the other hand, repeat buyers. Now, repeat buyers could also take advantage of interest rates, right? They would love to take advantage of interest rates. But what happened? Many of the repeat buyers at the same time, they are sellers, like I mentioned. At least in July and August or in June or so, there were some sellers were concerned about the public health conditions. If they were to put their house up in the market, they're concerned about whether people are actually going into their house and taking a look. So some of them could actually put things on hold. And if homeowners or potential sellers are not selling, they're not going to be repeat buyers. So some people actually decide not to sell at a time, and that's why first time buyers might have gone up in terms of share. But the other reason also is for first time buyers, the way to take advantage of low interest rate is what? To buy a house, right? To jump into the market and buy a house. But what about potential repeat buyers? But if they want to take advantage of low interest rates, they may not necessarily need to sell their house. They could refinance. If they refinance, they can actually take advantage of the low cost of borrowing. So some people were actually doing that, and that's why the first time buyer share might have gone up. Now, what about in moving forward in 2021? Are we going to see first time buyers share continue to stay at a very high level? Well, that's a little tough to say for sure. Now, NAR released some numbers, I think, at the end of last year, saying that that number actually started going down. Um, it could potentially be that case because if you take a look at the environment for first-time buyers, active listings, new listings continue to decline, partly because of concern about public health conditions, but more so because sellers are not sure whether they will be able to buy a home if they were to sell property. So you can take a look at the active listing here. Actually has been dropping for the last few months, consistently at about 40 some percent. And that specifically, if you look at the lower price segments, which first time buyers tend to be interested in most, they are actually dropping even more. So because of that reason, there are tight inventory, especially for first time buyers. That makes it a little difficult. And that actually push up home prices. And home prices, yeah, could be mitigated, increase in price, could be mitigated, by, let's say, low interest rates, cost of borrowing. But here's the thing, for first time buyers, they also need to come up with a down payment. Higher prices also mean higher down payment. And, it might not work in the advantage of first time buyers. And as such, housing affordability is not going to be a good number for first time buyers this year. And that's why I think, we could possibly see a dip in first time buyer share as this year compared to last year. There are other changes as well. Um, Things like people's housing preference. We know that people change their housing preference partly because of the ability to work from home, right? We're working from home, I'm working from home. And when you work at home, you probably need a little bit more space. And we ask realtors whether they notice some changes on housing preferences, and almost 50%, 45% of them said they noticed changes from the buyer's housing preference. And if you look at the type of changes, they're opting for a bigger house, right? They're opting for more room. Uh, they're looking for they're not as concerned about commuting anymore. They don't necessarily have to live in a major metropolitan area. In fact, they could actually live a little bit further away if they actually have to go into the office just once or twice every month. So those are changes that we should probably take note of. Now, whether those change will be permanent or not, of course, we have to see how things go this year. But safe to say we probably will see more people working from home. It may not be as significant an increase as what we saw in, let's say, mid of last year. But I think you will see people working from home, and so we have to adjust our um, uh, recommendation accordingly. And we actually saw quite a bit of increase in resort area and vacation home. If you look at vacation home, that share, of course, it didn't look like it increased a whole lot, but that number, the vacation home made up about 6% of all home sales, as compared to 3 or 4% or 5% in the last few years. That actually is the highest number since 2016. And so that might be, something that people want to buy, during their time, because if they are working from home, they might actually as well work in an area where they feel they can get a little bit more space surrounding them. And that's exactly what happened in the resort market. If you look at some of these resort market that people go to, Big Bear, Lake Tahoe, take a look at what happened in the first chart on top here. Sales in 2020 in Big Bear actually increased by 93% compared to the year before. Lake Tahoe also increased significantly, same as South Lake Tahoe or Lake Arrowhead and Mammoth Lake. Increased quite significantly, a lot more so than the just the tradition the other markets. As far as price, also increased by about 20%, increased about 18, 19%. In 2020, for the state as a whole, it increased by about 11% for the state as a whole. So you see that the increase in price is pretty much is more significant than the rest of the market. Um, but again, whether that will continue, that is of course up in the air. That's something that maybe it happens just a surge in the second half of the year, but we'll have to see how that goes. Now, keep in mind though, even though we're seeing increase in sales in the resort market, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not seeing increase in some of the other areas. Now, I know we've talked about some, or you might have heard about, the exodus from major metropolitan area to more suburban area. We are seeing some of those people, some people moving from major metropolitan area to suburban area. That's very true. But at the same time, the sense of home ownership, the importance of home ownership, as well as low rates, actually have pushed up sales in the major metropolitan areas as well. We'll go over that when we talk about some of the regional and city stuff. What about investors? Investors, you probably know already. They're concerned. They're concerned about eviction moratorium. Some people are concerned about eviction moratorium because of their landlord. Many of the landlords, they're not sure what's going to happen, whether they will be able to collect their rent. In 2020, of course, we have the eviction moratorium. First, it was pushed all the way to the end of the year, and then it got extended to February, end of February for California. And then recently it got extended all the way to, I think, June. It could potentially extend it further back to September, depending on the economy and the situation with the rental market. So investors are concerned. They're concerned. And so some of the investors may have already pulled back, wait until things get cleared up a little bit before jumping back into the market. So not a surprise to see that investor share dropped to 8.1%. Used to be at one point close to 20%, 18, 19%. Even the last few years, it was around 12% or so. So it dropped partly because of concerns about investors. So talked quite a bit about demand. Now let's talk about a little bit about supply. Supply, I've shown you the slide already. It has been dropping about 40, 45% or 50% or so. I do believe that the first half of the year, that trend will continue. But we'll continue to see in the first half of this year, active listing dropping about 40, 45% for at least a few months. Then in the second half of the year, things could be a little bit better. When I say a little bit better, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to drop. It probably will drop less. I'm hoping that it will actually go back to maybe about 15%, 20%, but that depends on how hot the market is. And with a significant surge in demand and also a very tight supply, and you can see that as far as competition goes, we have a lot of competition in the market. This chart shows you the percent of sales that receive multiple offers. In 2020, 60%, close to 60% received multiple offers. That's the highest in the last 3 years. But take a look at the average offer at almost 4.8. I know for some areas it's not that important. That number is very low. You might have seen 15 offers in the past, and even in the Bay Area, you could see more like 20. But 5 for the state is actually a high number. So let's look at price for a minute before we talk a little bit more about regional stuff. Prices have been, statewide median price have been rising quite fast. I did not expect home prices to actually rise at that level. In the last 6 months, it has been increasing by 15, 16% by double digit. And we have been setting records all along in the last half of the year. Who would have thought that we would actually hit that level? 717 to 718 is actually a record high number. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to set high number for 2021. And like I said, with that higher price, sellers are motivated. Sellers are feeling good, but at the same time, how many of them are selling? For those sellers who actually sold, they actually make quite a bit of money. The net cash gain is about 210,000. That's actually the highest that we have seen since 2005. So sellers are making money, but why are they not selling? Because sellers are concerned, like I said, about whether they're able to buy again. If you ask, when we ask sellers, when we ask in a survey, how many sellers actually plan to buy after selling their property, 54%. So if those sellers needed to buy a property, they need to be concerned about whether they will be able to find one. And unfortunately, because of the tight tight supply situation, we have some difficulty. What about the more local level, LA, and also some of the cities specific level that I'll show you? Um, if you look at Southern California as a whole, here is the regional number. Um, it's trending pretty consistently with the state of California. It's also for the year as a whole. It also increased by more than 30%, but on a year-to-date basis, a slight increase of close to 2%, 1.9 to be exact. Price-wise, also double-digit increase of 13%, with very, very tight inventory at 1.3 months. Um, Property staying on the market for only 10 days. Now, if we look at hone in and look at individual county, here's a snapshot. Here's again the snapshot. This slide on the left-hand side, this graph on the left-hand side show you the December number. This slide on the right-hand side shows you the year number, 2020 versus 2019. Um, the dark blue bar is closed sales. The light blue bar, that's pending sales. So you can see, based on that dark blue bar, every single county in Southern California shows an increase. For LA specifically, it shows a 30% increase in closed sales. Very, very impressive. But more impressive is the pending sales. Pending sales, usually, in December, that's when we have our holiday season, right? But last year was not exactly a holiday season. A lot of people took advantage of the low interest rate and went in. So that's why at the end of last year, we actually saw a significant increase in pending sales, meaning January would have turned out to be a very good month. I haven't looked at the January's numbers yet. We're working on it, but I'm not surprised. I would not be surprised if we actually saw a 20-30% increase in sales compared to the year before. And the year as a whole, you can see every single county except for LA County actually increased in sales. Now, LA County may be showing a decrease for the year as a whole, but for the second half of the year was pretty robust. The second half of the year has actually started catching up with other counties. The reason why LA County may not be growing as fast is partly because a lot of people considered LA as a major metropolitan area, for one thing. And at the beginning of the pandemic, in April, May, and June, people may actually try to avoid buying in LA County, specifically downtown, because of concern about being in a very dense location. But things actually gotten a little bit better, and I think low interest rate might have fueled demand as well. So you're seeing some increase in LA County as a whole. Now, LA County is pretty big also, so people may be buying in different areas. So we are seeing some increase in sales in LA County, but I think 2021 will probably catch up. Now, of course, tight supply may remain an issue. Southern California, you can see Southern California actually dropped more than 50% for supply, while we actually saw an increase in sales. So that's going to create some upward pressure on price. Individual county-wide, take a look at the active listings. Obviously, it's dropping the most in San Bernardino and Ventura. Those are dropping like 68%, 65% or so. For San Bernardino, it's a very affordable county. And if people actually can work from home, a lot of people actually might be, working in or buying in San Bernardino. And as such, we are seeing some increase in some drop off in supply, basically because of the increase in sales as well. Price-wise, if you have tight supply and very high demand, what's going to happen? You see some increase in price, right? Here's some double-digit increase at the end of last year. LA increased by 10.6, but look at San Bernardino, look at San Diego, all increased by double digit. We might continue to see some of those, And part of it is because of the interest in buying high-end home. As I mentioned, there are more high-end home sales than other price segments, and that might actually push up some price level. Now, I'm going to show you a couple slides for individual cities, and then I'll have a list of cities that you can actually get a snapshot from, and you can grab those slides, from this PowerPoint. But you can also go on to our C.A.R. website and grab those, and I'll tell you where you may be able to get those. But first, let's take a look at all the cities that you might be interested in. I selected a few from Alhambra all the way to Temple City. You can see again, this is comparing 2019 to 2020. Um, you notice a slight difference comparing these cities as compared to LA or some of the other counties, or even compared to the state. Some of the cities here from Alhambra to Temple City, they actually show a decline. In fact, for Rosemead, it actually declined quite a bit for the year as a whole. So you might be wondering, how come, the San Gabriel Valley, some of the cities in San Gabriel Valley are not doing as well as LA County or compared to the state as a whole? I think part of the reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, many of you probably know, some of the sales being done in San Gabriel Valley, they were done by international buyers. International buyers might be lacking a little bit because of concerns about or not being able to travel, not being able to come to the U.S. and California to check out some properties, but also because of remember, it's a global recession. So that means many countries, including China, including some of the other areas, some of the other countries are also dipping in their economic activity, and that affects some sales. I mean, you notice that some dip in sales in Tampa City, in Arcadia, those are dip in sales. Now, I would say at the beginning of the year or the first half of the year, that's where most of the dips are. In the last 6 months or so, things probably have picked up a little bit. I don't have too many slides or information on international buyers now. I will be doing an outreach for Global Real Estate Forum tomorrow, so I'll talk more about international buyers if you're interested. But if you look at a citywide, individual city 2020 compared to 2019, you see that the increase in price also they're not as high as some of the other counties, as I showed earlier. Alhambra actually show increase. Acadia actually dipped a little bit as well as San Marino dipped slightly, 2.1%. So they're not as strong, partly because, again, I think concerned about some of the international buyers may not necessarily be buying in 2020, and that could be a fact. Now, 2021, is that going to be a better year? We hope so, but of course, it depends on a lot of factors. So here are the slides that I told you about. These are snapshots of individual city that I'm going to quickly go over before we talk about the economy itself. These slides shows you, the individual slide from Alhambra to Acadia to Temple City. This shows you the theme is pretty much the same. Price and sales are actually pretty decent for most cities, but active listings or the inventory continue to drop, with house staying on the market for a short time. So I'll quickly go over these, but again, I'll show you at the end where you might be able to get these slides. So Alhambra had increased in sales and price. Acadia also increased in price at the end of this. This is at the end of this year. This is not for the year as a whole in 2020. So at the end of the year, it's showing some improvement. If you look at Monterey Park and the median price and sales continue to increase, and Monterey Park actually increased by close to 40%. Pasadena about 31% increase in sales. Sale price also increased by 7.6. San Gabriel has actually dipped a little bit in the month of December, but price continue to stay at a pretty high level. Temple City dipped slightly in terms of home sales. Price increased by close to 7%. So now to get those slides, I'll verbally tell you where it is now, but then I may be able to show you where it is at the end. Just go to the C.A.R. website, go to the market data section, and then on the right hand side you'll see the housing market overview. Again, I'll see if I can show that to you at the very end. So let's talk about the economy first, because you need to understand the big picture in order to understand what's going to happen in 2021. First, when we talk about economy, usually we talk about GDP, we talk about labor market, we talk about a lot of different things, right? That those economic indicators. But this year, we need to add a little bit more. We need to talk about the coronavirus situation. We need to take a look at number of cases and number of the positivity rate for the coronavirus. If you look at these numbers, these are data that I collected from CDC, from the state of California. You can see at the end of last year, but the beginning of this year, we actually continue to stay at a very, very high level. At the beginning of the year, number of cases, it was close to 40,000 a day. That's very, very significant. But the good news is we started seeing some cases sliding down. Part of the reason why we saw cases spiked up at the beginning of this year or late last year was because of the holiday gathering and because of traveling. But things have improved. We're still at a very high level, 10,000 a day. It's not a very low number, but at least it's improving. If you look at the positivity rate on the right-hand side of the chart, it has dropped down to 5.8%. At one point, it was 15%. So it's good that it's down to 5.8, but we still have a lot of work to do. We still need to do our social distancing. Take a look at the number of vaccine rollout. Of course, that's important. That's a very important part of how we can improve the economy as well as the public health conditions. This is a chart on the nation as a whole. It shows you on a daily basis, going back to mid of December, how many doses were actually administered on a daily basis. It started off at a very small number, and it has been ramping up. Right now, the average is about 1.46 million, which is not a small number, but still, even with doing 1.5 million doses every day or so for California so far, as of the 8th, we're still only about 10% people actually got their first dose. Still a long way to go. So how long is it going to take, for us to actually get back to somewhat normal? If you look at that rate, then for the U.S. as a whole, by July 7th, 50% of the people in the United States will be inoculated or vaccinated. That means we still have a long way to go. By December 1st, only about 90%. So don't ease up yet. Just remember, we still have to practice social distancing in order to get, to keep this under control. So it's still a long way to go. And of course, that was already affecting the economy. And last year, 2020, the first 2 quarters, it dropped. And if you look at this chart on the right-hand side, this is economic activity. Dropped 4% at the beginning of the year in the first quarter, and then dropped another 31% because of the lockdown. Now, we did bounce back with a 33% in the third quarter, right here. And we also increased another 4%. But even with those significant increase, we're still down maybe about 2-3% from the pre-pandemic level. If you just look at retail sales, this is retail sales number. It shows you the retail sales level by month, go from January 2020 all the way to December. If you look at this chart, it looks like we are back to normal because this is the level that we were at pre-pandemic. And if you extract this line all the way to December, you see that dark blue line. It seems like it's actually surpassed that level already. But in reality, that's not that easy to understand. If you look at it, you split it out by retail sales without food services, meaning restaurants and bars, versus the restaurants and bars retail sales, you see the big difference. Without, because of those, some of the retail sales you can do it from using Amazon or order online, the retail sales actually increased by close to 6.3%. But if you look at food and services and restaurants and bars, it actually dropped by 21.2% or so. So it dropped quite significantly. And that affects a lot of small businesses. Small businesses in California actually dropped by about 31% in small revenue as of the end of last year. That has a lot of impact on a lot of people, and that affects the labor market. The labor market, when small businesses cannot make money, what do? They laid people off. And that's what happened when we had the lockdown. 16 or 15% of the people actually got laid off. The number got improved. Now has a drop down to 6.3%. But there is a caveat for this number because some people actually decided, okay, well, I couldn't find a job. They decided to leave the labor force totally, and that actually affects the unemployment rate. I wouldn't be surprised next month that number actually would go up, but I think all in all, things will probably improve. Now, before I talk about how it will improve, take a look at where the economy got hit hardest. I mentioned earlier that the economy hit the lower income household a little bit harder, and that's exactly what happened. Um, people who make wages below 27,000, 30,000 or so drop in employment by 25%. Those who make wages above 60,000 continue to increase by in unemployment by 0.8%. That's where the difference is, and that's why it's got hit harder. I know I'm running out of time. I'm going to quickly get to the outlook and give me a few more minutes. So job growth wise, it's improving, but it's not improving fast enough. So we're not going to get back to that job growth, the same job level until probably 2023, 2024. We will improve in employment, but it's probably not going to be that fast. Take a look at how many people are still unemployed. We dropped about 2.6 million for California right when we had the lockdown. We bounced back with about 1.2. We're still down by about 1 million, 1.34 million or so. So still a long way to go. So let me wrap it up with the outlook in the next few slides. For the economy to continue to improve, of course, government has been doing a lot of stuff. We might have another fiscal stimulus. We probably will have another fiscal stimulus in the next couple months or so. We may even have another one towards the end of the year. But the recovery is going to take some time. Take a look at this recovery. You might have heard the word K-shaped recovery. That is, some sectors are actually doing better. Technology sectors, software sectors, they're doing better because people can work from home. But what about the other sectors? People can't travel, still can't travel right now. So the travel sectors, the entertainment sectors, those are actually suffering. Um, with that, with the stimulus and with the vaccine rolls out, we believe that it's going to improve the economy. 4.2% is what we have as of now. It probably will increase. Unemployment rate, this number probably will be lower. I already updated some numbers, but I haven't finalized them yet. But most likely, the unemployment rate will be below the 7.1%, maybe somewhere around 6.5 or maybe even 6%. So the economy will continue to improve. Same for California. Also, unemployment will increase, will dip probably below the 9%, maybe about 8.5% for the year as a whole. And for the housing market, things are actually looking up. As I mentioned, pending sales increased close to 53% at the end of last year, meaning we're going to see some good close sales in January as well as February, probably. Mortgage applications, another indicator that shows you that the market is doing well, increased by 16% compared to a year ago. Now, some people are concerned about foreclosures, distress sales, or maybe not concerned. They're hoping that there will be distress sales because of discount properties. But first, take a look at this picture about how buyers and buyers have been purchasing their properties compared to 12, 13 years ago. If you look at what happened in 2006, 2007, you think that distress sales will be again increased significantly. I would not suggest to think that way, because if you take a look at 2006, there were a lot of people. Take a look at these categories. A lot of people actually take risky loans. Second mortgages were at 43%. ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, was at 33%. Take a look at what happened in the last few years. A lot fewer people actually took risky loans. Very, very few people. And people are putting number of people who actually put zero down payment, 21% versus only about 8 or 9%, in the last few years. And people's housing finance is actually a little bit better. Even with a higher home prices, their mortgage payment is actually lower than in 2006. So with that said, I believe distress sales, we probably will have some foreclosures. Don't take me wrong, we'll probably will have, about, a few percentage, but I believe it's going to be more like 8% or below as compared to in the past in 12 and 20, 2009, 2010, we had 60% of sales being distress sales. We're not going to see that. Most likely 8%, and the discount that you're going to see from distress sales is probably less than 10%. And partly because lenders, while the market is very, very tight for one thing, and lenders can actually use the market to sell their properties. They don't necessarily want to be a property management company anymore, like what they did, in 2007, 2008. With that said, here are some assumptions, and here are the numbers that I believe we'll have, maybe even better actually, for 2021. We expect a 3.3% increase in sales, probably even more than that. As I mentioned, when we make some adjustment to our assumptions, price wise, I'm being very conservative here at 4.4. Most likely it will increase a little bit higher than that. With that said, here's the quick summary. I think the economy is going to get better, but it's going to take some time. It's probably going to see, you will probably see some numbers that look worse, and then it will bounce back, in the next few weeks or so. And as far as the driving, force, it's still the pandemic, it's still the coronavirus. If we can get it under control, I think we'll get back a little faster. The housing market remain low, partly remain robust, partly because interest rate remain low, and it will stay low for quite some time. I think for the first half of the year, you can expect 30-year fixed rates to be below 3%, but second half of the year, it may actually inch up above 3%, but probably not far from it. We still have very, very tight supply, and that will actually push up home prices, and we expect home prices to increase more. You may see some robust gain in the first half. Second half of the year, I think it will tame down a little bit. And with that said, I showed you a lot of surveys earlier, and we probably need some help in getting people to participate in our survey. So, if you don't mind taking a look at a C.A.R.org website, go to survey, you'll find this actually graphics there, and hopefully you can help us, with taking some of those surveys. And one more thing, one last thing, I promise. This Saturday, we actually showed last Saturday also, but you might have seen a show called California Dreaming. That's actually sponsored by C.A.R., by California Association of Realtors. It's a half an hour show that's being shown on ABC, and definitely check it out. Our president actually talked about the show, and actually have an introduction of the show on ABC. So feel free to check it out. And with that, here's my contact information. I know I took up a lot of the time. I don't know if we have time to actually talk about Q&A, but I'm here. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Oscar. It seems like we do have one question, so let's kind of squeeze that in. The question is the population. What percentage of buyers and sellers are senior citizens in Southern California, and are there any shift in the population in terms of who's buying, who's selling, in terms of the age groups?
Well, of course, we've heard, and anecdotally, many of you probably have heard, we are a lot of millennials. Probably in their 30s now, late 20s, maybe to late 20s to maybe late 30s. They're in a prime age of buying right now, because the economy had been good in last few years ago before the pandemic hit. So they're in a position to buy. So you will see actually some millennial buying properties right now. Now at the same time, those so you will see a flood, and that's the reason why we're seeing increase in number of people actually buying, increase in sales in the second half of the year. But at the same time, the people who are in the boomer generations are also in the silence generation, which means people who retired. They may be holding on to their property and may not be able to sell, partly because, well, they're more concerned because of their age, concerned about buying, concerned about selling. So that might be the reason why we're seeing some tight supply right now. So in the next this year, next year, you probably will continue to see a flood of millennial trying to buy more properties. But at the same time, we need supply. So That's one of the reasons why, with Prop 19 that C.A.R. passed, C.A.R. helped pass, in last year, could actually help to release some of those properties as seniors are able to take their portable tax base to another counties or to another cities. So hopefully, that will be the case. But yes, in terms of demographics, we will probably continue to see more younger buyers coming into the market in the next few years.
Yeah. Well, how do you see the younger generation afford the homes?
That's the tough part. Now, that's the one that I'm a little concerned about. Now, with 6 months ago, when interest rate actually dropped to a very low level, as I mentioned, monthly payment actually is, appeared to be even lower compared to a year ago, even though home prices have gone up. But because of home prices actually started rising a little bit more robustly, I'm not as concerned about the interest rates. I'm more concerned about the down payment. I'm concerned about people actually over leveraging. Hopefully that is not the case. And I do believe that home prices, the home prices will continue to grow, but price growth will actually slow down a little bit, and that might actually help people afford to buy a home without overextending themselves. I hope that will not be the case, later this year or next year. But I believe a lot of people do learn from 10, 12 years ago. And I think we do have some mechanism that the government put in now that actually makes sure that we're not taking as much risky loan. But the lending environment also help. Right now you can secure 3%, 4%. The question is the down payment, and hopefully, some of you may be paying attention to the Biden administration. They actually have on their list of things to do for the housing. They actually have a plan for the first-time buyers, a 15,000 first-time buyer tax credit, I believe. When that is going to be implemented, or whether that is going to be implemented, who knows? But we'll find out eventually.
Okay. Um, so it's interesting to see that the housing market is taking a boom and for potentially for the first quarter and second quarter of this year. But then what about its relationship with the unemployment rate? So yeah, how does that work?
So unemployment rate right now, if you take a look at unemployment rate, it is at 6.3% that I showed earlier. Now that number will continue to, by the end of the year, I'm pretty sure that number will be a better number. Now it's not going to be what we saw in 12 months ago or 2 years ago at below 4%. That's going to take some time. So as far as the employment is concerned, here's part of the reasons why housing market is acting a little differently compared to the economy. The housing market, as I mentioned earlier, is actually at a very rare bright spot, and that's because of low interest rates. But also the sectors that actually affected the most are the lower income sectors. And lower income sectors, they tend to have more renters. The higher income sectors, which actually have less impact by the economy, continue to do actually okay, and that's why you're seeing the more people are actually buying homes because of low interest rates, but also because they're less affected by the economy. And the increase in price, it's partly because of the shift in the mix of sales. You're seeing those people who are not affected buying higher priced home, and that's why you push the home prices up higher. So I do believe that there are some permanent changes to the economy or to the housing market because of the pandemic. That is, people feel more likely to feel more a bigger desire to buy a home now because of the fact that they have to work from home. The question is, how many people actually would change their mind now to becoming renters to homeowners? That is the questions I think we have to observe in the next couple of years or so.
Okay. I'm going to combine these two questions that has very
Sure.
similar themes. It's with the whole new year starting. I think a lot of people are curious about with this year, like where the economy is going, does it impact 1031? And how does Prop 19 impact us as well?
Well, the Prop 19, I'll go with Prop 19 first. When I say Prop 19 earlier, it's still, I think C.A.R. is going to do a campaign. We'll start sending some marketing material to educate people about Prop 19. Prop 19 allows people to carry, in a nutshell, allows people to carry their portable tax base, the tax that they're paying right now, carry the Prop 13, that they have on their house. And if they meet a certain criteria, like, their age, if they're 55 or older, they will be able to, and if they're buying a homes that are for primary use, they will be able to move, within the state. So that will actually help people. If people are concerned about, that if they were to buy a house, they will have to pay higher property taxes, then that will resolve that issue. So hopefully that will help, some of those people to move from to other to another property, and that might actually free up, the supply. Now, I said supply, but it's not exactly supply. It's going to increase number of transactions for realtors. But in order to really increase supply, hopefully, when developers realize that, okay, people are moving more, they will figure out where to build more homes, and they actually have to. Developers will actually have to develop more homes or build more homes in the next few years to accommodate the increase in transactions. So that's how Prop 19 is going to help. Now, 1031 is a little different. I think I have to go back and take a look at, what the correlation might be between Prop 19 and 1031, whether that is going to have an impact. Now, 1031 is a little different. The property tax base may not necessarily be, the implication may not necessarily be the same. So let me go back and take a look and see if there's, what the impact could be, of Prop 1930 versus 1031, and get back to you. For the person who asked these questions, feel free to send me, the question to my email at oscarw@cr.org.
Okay. All right. Thank you for taking a whole slew of questions for us, Oscar. Now I'm going to hand it back to Pauline.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff, for asking the questions. Again, if I didn't answer some of the questions that you want to ask me and didn't come up with those questions as of now, feel free to send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer some of those other questions offline.
Thank you, Oscar. Go for it,
Thank
Pauline.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, Oscar and Jeff, for this great section. Now we are full of the energy to work on a positive 2021 real estate outlook. According to your information, we're really full of the hope. Okay, let's give a big round of applause to Oscar. Thank you. On behalf of West and Gayville Valley Realtors, it is really our great time to meet you. I remember last year, you're the first speaker in our Zoom meeting. You encouraged me to face on the camera. Thank you so much. And we truly appreciate and thank you, Mr. Oscar Wei, again, C.A.R. Deputy Chief Economist, for your valuable and informative presentation. We would like to see you soon when we can meet in person, hopefully end of the year or third quarter. And a quick reminder, we want to remind you to meet us next Tuesday, February 16th at 11 o'clock, another valuable meeting and class. Phase 1, environmental site assessment and NHD disclosure. What is the difference and what is a similarity, by Ami Adini and Stephen Strickland. And remember, March 2nd, this important class, 11 o'clock Tuesday, 2021, new tax update and how Biden new tax policy will impact our real estate market, by CPA, also named Jeff Huang, not our Jeff Huang, CPA Jeff Huang. So we thank you again, Oscar, Mel, and Jeff, Fong, and all of you to come to today's meeting. What a fruitful meeting today. And we see you next Tuesday. We wish you stay safe, stay healthy, and with so many information, we have a great and successful 2021. And by the way, happy Lunar New Year on the coming Friday. We see you soon, Oscar.